I thought that it might be fun to do a little bit of a retrospective in this era. This really is a particularly bad decade. I will say that this decade had some really, really good gems. That's because the early 2000s were more or less a continuation of the 90s. When I talk about this decade, I tend to refer more to the mid-2000s, which not even the early 2000s can really save. It's not even the shows that's most of the problems, it's the trends that started here, and we'll talk about them soon. So, let's take this year by year.
I'm not coming in anymore. Everything I want is just outside the store. I'm not coming in anymore. Got too many friends on the outside that don't include you.
When people talk about the 90s, they generally mean like 1990 to 2002. I'm not saying that these first few years don't really count. It's just that they are closer to previous trends than future trends. For example, Rocket Power, the show that exemplifies everything annoying and stupid about the 90s, started in 1999. Most of the shows you remember from this year are continuations from previous years, like SpongeBob or Ed, Edd and Eddy. It's not like there weren't any new shows that aired in this year though. Cartoon Network started airing Sheep in the Big City, an average show that was never seen again. Nickelodeon brought us, As Told by Ginger, which was fine. Disney Channel has got The Weekenders and Teacher's Pet. Kids WP had gotten Jackie Chan Adventures and Static Shock, the only shows that stand out in my memory. Anything else in the realm of shows that aired in this year? Aqua Teen Hunger Force and Antero. All in all, I'd say that this year is okay. Chances are, you were watching something that aired in a previous year. Personally, the only show I could find that is just above levels of bland is Pelswick. Not just by the art style, there's more than just that, like a lot. In the realm of movies, Disney had The Emperor's New Groove, which is one of their best movies of the 2000s. This is largely an opinion thing, but I don't think that it's as good as the classics from the Disney Renaissance, and the only ones that hit that level of quality this decade will be Lilo and Stitch. This was an awkward time for DreamWorks. They didn't have much of an identity yet. They released two films, The Road to El Dorado and Chicken Run. I think both of those movies are good, but they didn't exactly set the world in fire. You can clearly see that the trends have begun getting set. The copy and paste stuff or the all-style no-substance efforts were making more money than the ones that had a lot more passion or effort behind them. This is going to be a leech on this decade, as everyone begins trying to find the quickest way to make a buck. There were some big, major changes in the realm of cartoons this year. Once again, let's take a look at television to start off. Cartoon Network did Funky Awesome. Samurai Jack aired this year, and it's my favorite animated series of all time. Time Squad also aired, which was a pretty good standby. In Nickelodeon, we've got The Fairly Odd Parents and Inferior. The Fairly Odd Parents started out good, but it went on way too long, for its own good. And we all know that Inferior was cut for some reason or another. So did House of Mouse, The Proud Family and Sagla. That's a pretty good lineup. Now let's talk about the crap. First of all, John K. works in a show called The Ripping Friends. Basically what happened was the network decided to take a guy's show whose bread and butter was essentially never using the same expression twice and made all of the characters perfectly on model. Instead of being enjoyable to gross out fans, it ended up enjoyable to no one. Sitting Ducks is nothing more than just soulless and generic. A bunch of ducks and crocodiles live together in a town and the show constantly beats on the ducks because they get stalked by the crocs every day. This shtick gets old, quickly. The Cramp Twins should be called the Crap Twins, because it's basically Invaders in light. Totally Spies is essentially Kim Possible light that no one would give a second glance, if it didn't appeal to every fetish imaginable. You've got an inflation fetish? Totally Spies has an episode, for you. Age regression? Totally Spies. Amnesia? Yup. Becoming part animal? And finally there's Lloyd in Space, or, as it should be called, Doug in Space, because it's about as interesting as the other soulless bland shit that came out this year, like Mr. Hell and Braceface. Television is a half and half. As for movies, DreamWorks released Shrek this year. Oh boy, I have to talk about these films. Shrek is mostly a parody film. It's very largely a parody of cartoon cinema, taking a typical Disney-esque story and making it absolutely ridiculous. It worked. Critics loved this, consumers loved this, and this changed the history of theatrical cartoons forever. I'm not kidding. For a very, very long time, this is the film that everyone wanted to be. That includes Disney. Let me explain this simply. It would be like if Scary Movie parodied a Stanley Kubrick movie and had enormous success, so Stanley Kubrick decided to stop making impressive and genre-defining films and tried to make Scary Movie. The best film this year was Monsters Incorporated. Yeah, this decade was Pixar's heyday, and if it wasn't for Pixar then Disney may not have lasted the decade.
Anymore. Got too many friends on the outside that don't include.
Welcome to the year where everything goes wrong. For good television we've got Codename Kids Next Door in Cartoon Network, being the last new cartoon to fall under the Cartoon label, and Jimmy Neutron, one of the most popular CGI television shows out there. Then there's Kim Possible and Fillmore. There were more good stuff than just this, like Muchalacha. But here's the thing, a bad time in a media's history is not just when there's more bad stuff than good stuff. It's when the bad stuff is more popular than the good stuff. The other good stuff of this year didn't last very long. Chalk Zone didn't last very long. What's New, Scooby-Doo didn't last very long. Clone High didn't last very long. Ozzy and Bricks didn't last very long. In between these shows we had to deal with a lot of soulless bland shit like Timo Supremo and Yakety Yak, which was the majority of the shows of this era. Speaking of Muchalacha, this was one of my favorite shows that came out this year. But Muchalacha has a dirty secret. This was the first mainstream television show animated with Flash. In the 2010s, Flash is a very useful program that allows people to add more aesthetic appeal and organize their cartoon better and opens the door to cartoons to many more people. In the 2000s, Flash was a novelty that allowed any greedy corporation to make cartoons absurdly cheap and absurdly quick. This is going to be a major problem that persists throughout the rest of the decade. In fact, I think that Timo Supremo was one of the shows that used Flash poorly. When Flash is done badly, the cartoons look lazy and lifeless. Time to talk about movies. This is a very sad year for animated movies. It's not because they are bad, but because they are good and financial failures. Disney made Treasure Planet, which was such a spectacular box office failure that the company flat out decided to stop making 2D animated films. The other big failure, the Powerpuff Girls movie, which made Cartoon Network decide not to have any theatrical movies forever. Why is that? Well, this was a decade before friendship is magic and guys liking girly cartoons were kind of frowned upon. Do you want to know the other movies that came out this year? 8 Crazy Nights, because Hey Arnold, the movie, because people still remember that movie. Ice Age, putting Blue Sky Studios in the scene. The best movie this year, by far, was Lilo and Stitch. In fact, I think that it's Disney's best movie of the decade. That might not be saying much, but I really love this movie. Kids television is doing pretty damn good. Ziathlon Showdown takes inspiration from Jackie Chan Adventures in a Gotta Catch 'Em All themed show with Asian influence. My life as a teenage robot isn't great by any means, but it's enjoyable. Then there's Code Lyoko, which was really good in both writing and technology. As you can see, Western cartoons are getting a lot more anime influence. We've seen it with things like Samurai Jack, but it's on full display here and it's definitely one of the better trends we are getting in this decade. Also, we got Teen Titans and Star Wars, Clone Wars. And there were some more underrated gems that didn't last very long, Lilo and Stitch, Duck Dodgers, and Kenny the Shark. We also got Billy and Mandy, one of the most popular dark comedy cartoons out there. Also, we got another Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles revival, which was good despite the people who brought it to us. Don't think for a second that I'm going to talk about 4Kids. Seriously, there are a couple shows that came out this year that are just beyond fine, like Jacob Tutu and Tudenstein. Now let's talk about the crap. Nickelodeon produced a Rugrats spin-off known as All Grown Up, where they aged the babies into teenagers. The most appalling thing about this spin-off was because of its teen cliches and the fact that it displayed the teens as jackasses being jackasses to each other. It definitely did not age well for those particular reasons. My Dad the Rockstar takes the wacky parent, serious child trope to 100, an absurdly ridiculous 100. Martin Mystery is one of those shows who beat on the only sane person for their dickish personality, brother and sister style. And then, there's Sabrina's Secret Life, which may be one of the worst cartoon sequels in existence but definitely has one of the most clunky theme songs in existence. Adult cartoons are another story. Watching an episode of Adult Party Cartoon was a worse experience than getting all 4 of my wisdom teeth removed in the same day. Stripperella was essentially softcore porn. Adult Swim has got no new shows this year. VH1 had Illustrated. Apparently, what I want to say right now is that Illustrated is just an absurdly pathetic attempt at parodying pop culture and political correctness as a sketch show. Let me put it this way, it's like when someone is writing a sketch for Mad TV but forgot to remember the basic rules of actual comedy, so it relies on offensiveness, try-hard jokes and stupidity just to have it appeal to what the show's audience actually is, and the result always turns out forgettable. The parody depictions of celebrities and presidents are clearly one note. For example, George W. Bush acts like a dysfunctional moron and causes trouble in the White House because of it. In one sketch, a gang of drugs spend an entire minute watching two guys make out in honor of the show Friends. Movies. If Treasure Planet didn't get Disney to tell its 2D department, then Brother Bear would have. I like Treasure Planet a lot. Brother Bear is a disjointed mess of a movie. DreamWorks released Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas this year. Bag me. The only good theatrical movie this year was probably Finding Nemo, which is probably the best looking animated film ever. Other than that, you're going to have to go to another country to catch the triplets of Belleville. This is a pretty terrible year, because there's nothing fucking happening.
Anymore. Got too many friends on the outside that don't include you.
Hey, at least there's stuff happening this year. Unfortunately, there aren't many good shows that last. The most notable ones are Danny Phantom, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, and The Venture Brothers. Dave the Barbarian and Megas XLR were great, but they didn't last very long. I bet you've never even heard of which. A lot of the stuff this year was pretty meh, like Atomic Betty and Winx Club. And now the crap, which is about 75% of this year. Let's start with Hi Hi Puffy and Yumi. Straight off of their fame and success for writing the theme for Teen Titans, they've got their own show, which is one of those cheaply made flash deals. I'll give it this, at least it made a style out of it. But I've always thought that this show was to anim what Itchy and Scratchy is to actual cartoons. It's something that's only mildly interesting and should be thrown in the background. But it's the best of the bad stuff this year. Brandy and Mr. Whiskers is a soulless piece of garbage. A rich dog and a dirty stupid bunny fall into the jungle and the show constantly beats on Brandy, because she's been pampered all of her life. Just like, when I talked about sitting ducks, the shtick gets old, quickly. Super Robot Monkey Team Hyperforce Go is clearly another example of a show that's better off being thrown in the background. And we have the A-Boom Crew. 4 episodes made it to air here, and the rest of the 14 aired in the UK. All you need to know about this show is that 90% of the dialogue is incomprehensible slang. In the first episode, one of the characters literally exclaims this.
Tony Hawkin' later, homie!
Adult cartoons have Father of the Pride and Drawn Together to cult classics, which I absolutely do not like. I don't see the appeal of either of these shows. Father of the Pride constantly advertised itself readily as the next big animated sitcom, which means it's trying so hard to be the next Simpsons or Family Guy, and had the need to claim that the people who were behind the show were also behind Shrek, resulting in parental television authorities launching campaigns against it. Let's just say that due to the show and even its so-called feature film-style animation budget being both far too expensive to produce, it eventually flopped hard. Drawn Together is a show with South Park envy. I've watched multiple episodes. Every joke was either too stupid, too cliché, or too vulgar. The ending of the second episode literally rips off Shrek. It's trying to be subversive, but too stupid. You cannot subvert a parody. If you took Spaceballs and replaced the villain with a baby, you wouldn't be parodying Spaceballs, you'd just be stealing Spaceballs' bit in a pitiful attempt to parody Star Wars. Before I go into full rant mode here, let's take a look at movies. Oh great, Disney released Home on the Range. That's great. Oh, DreamWorks released Shark Tale. But it's okay, because they also released Shrek 2, permanently pigeonholing them into that company that makes CG movies pandering to the lowest common denominator. The SpongeBob SquarePants movie is released in theaters, and despite enormous success is the last Nickelodeon movie released in theaters until the second one 11 years later, pretty much ending theatrical showings of animated television movies for quite some time. The best movie from this year was Mickey, Donald, Goofy, The Three Musketeers, which was only released on DVD for some reason.